Welcome to Forensic, ooh, I just fucked it up. Welcome to Forensic Science Sunday, where I tell you one true crime case that was solved using forensic science, all while doing, and that's right, my makeup. It's none of your business what's going on with my hair. It's none of your business. Don't even ask. Okay? Today's video is going to be featuring the ColourPop and Powerpuff Girl collaboration palette. Oh my god. Real quick, in the comments section, let me know which Powerpuff Girl you guys think that I am. I know I'm not a Powerpuff Girl, but leave me alone. A girl can dream, can't she? Also, let me know who is your favorite Powerpuff Girl. If you are a fan, go down there and do that right now really quick before I show you the other items, because it's gonna tell you which one. Okay, that's it. Your moment is over. You had your moment. It's actually Buttercup. Please read the disclaimer. I am not a professional makeup artist, beauty guru, or forensic pathologist. I'm just the average girl at home like you, planning makeup and talking about true crime. So if you love true crime and makeup mixed in with a little bit of comedy, then you're gonna love it over here. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Also, I just wanted to mention that the comment section is a privilege, okay? Don't fuck it up. Okay, Lucy obviously is here, as you can tell. Are you in the mood? No, you're not in the mood. She's gonna be going over some of the evidence that we're gonna talk about in today's case and reviewing it and making sure everything is correct. So yeah, glad to have her here with us today. Let's get into today's case. Now, this story all takes place in 1990 in Winnipeg, Canada, around the Fort Rouge area, where Shirley and Ed Andronowich lived with their 3 teenage daughters. Now, Ed and Shirley, they have been married for 20 years. Wow. It's a long time. Ed, he was a construction worker, and Shirley, she was a housewife. One night, Ed and Shirley had decided to go out. They went to this local sports bar that they always hung out at, and they were just, you know, getting a few drinks at the bar and hanging out. So all of their friends were at this sports bar, and Ed, he was kind of over it, and trust me, I feel you, boy. I'm an introvert too. Sometimes I'll be hanging out and I'll be like, I can't do it anymore, you guys. Like, I love you guys, I love hanging out, but literally like over it. So I feel you, Ed. I feel Ed on that. So yeah, so Ed just left her at the bar. She was there with his friends, so he felt like she was pretty safe. And Shirley stayed behind with their friends. She was very social and she wanted to hang out. So around midnight, Shirley left the bar and she headed home. And her daughter recalls hearing her come in that night, like late that night. I think they said it was like around 12 o'clock that night. According to her daughter, you could tell that she had been drinking, but she says that she's not sure that she was drunk or not. Like, she wasn't overboard, but she had a few. She did come home alone, so yeah, she didn't, thank God. Like, that would be awkward, right? Why would she come home with someone else when her husband and children are there? When she got back home, she was just trying to relax. Like, she was done for the night. She was tipsy. She had her drinks, you know, she was ready to just, like, you know, go to sleep. And Ed, he had a bone to pick with her, so they started arguing. And Shirley, I guess the argument must have gotten so bad that Shirley had to actually go take a walk and leave the home. According to Ed, he thought that Shirley was just getting some fresh air to cool down and that she would return, but she never did. So the next day, police showed up at the Andronowich's home, and one of the younger daughters, she answered the door and she saw there was police, and she was like, okay, this is serious. And they asked to speak with her father. So she went and got her father, and then she went upstairs while the police talked to Ed. Then the daughter went back downstairs and she saw her father, Ed, just standing at the door with his head down, and the police were saying, you know, do you want to tell her or should we tell her? All she can remember is that her father was standing there with his head down, looking at the floor like he couldn't even speak. And so that's when the cops told their daughter, like, that we found a body. It's your mother. She's been killed. I can't even imagine being a teenager and just hearing that, going through that must have been extremely awful and crazy for her. Apparently, a worker at a local school had discovered Shirley's body. So police discovered something really peculiar. Shirley had bite marks all over her body, and she had been beaten and mutilated. I mean, it was a pretty gruesome scene, to be honest with you. Her body was just laid out in public, like it wasn't even hidden in any kind of way. So, whoever did this was like, they had some balls. They wasn't even trying to hide it at all. Now, it appeared that Shirley had been strangled and hit in the head multiple times with a large piece of concrete. So, wow. She had been beaten so badly that it was kind of difficult for them to identify her at first because her facial features were really messed up. Now, as we all know, the first thing that police like to do is to rule out the closest person to the victim. So they went to interview Ed Andronowich. Upon interviewing Ed, he did come clean about the argument that he and Shirley had that night. He said that, they had gotten into an argument and that she left, and he had no idea what happened to her after that. But the homicide detectives wasn't really buying that, and they decided to interview Ed Andronowich again. They wanted to get more details on what had occurred between Ed and Shirley that night. Like, why were they arguing in the first place? Ed never revealed that in the initial interview. At some point during the interview, police asked Ed if he had any idea who would want to kill his wife. And you guys will not believe this. Like, you won't believe it. Ed tells police that he, in fact, is the murderer. Are you, like, her? Are you guys as shocked and surprised as I am? Like, what? Okay, no need to continue this investigation. I guess we can just wrap it up and arrest his ass, put him in jail now. Like, as they questioned him further, they got more details from Ed, and he actually did know a lot about the murder. He knew where the bodies were placed. He knew a lot of details about the scene that only the murderer or someone that was involved would have been able to know. Now, as you can imagine, this was pretty hard on the two girls, on their daughters, because their mother just got murdered, and now it appears like their father is the one who has done it. They were upset, they were angry, they felt like the cops were trying to pin it on their dad and set their dad up. They couldn't believe it. It was just very hard for them to digest, and they really just could not believe that their father did it, and they were pissed off at anybody who even remotely thought that that was true. So police really were like, okay, this is odd that he would confess so easily. So they were like, we need to check this for sure, because they want to make sure they're getting the right guy here. So the next day they question Ed again, and a second time Ed confesses to the murder. So police had no choice, since he kept admitting to this murder, to charge him, and Ed was charged with second-degree murder, and he was sent to a local jail in Winnipeg. He was actually held there. But investigators just had one teensy problem. A lot of the details that Ed Andronowich gave to police were not consistent with the scene of the crime. I mean, he knew a lot of details, but he was off on a lot of details as well. And although some of the details that he gave to police was off, he was still adamant that he was the one to have murdered his wife. He says that he was just drinking that night. And so because he was drinking, he couldn't remember all of the details correctly, and that's the reason why some of it is a little off, which I guess makes sense. If you were drinking, it would make sense for some of the details to be off. So police turned to forensic science for the answers, and they brought in a forensic geologist. So this forensic geologist was brought in to examine the 55-pound concrete block that was used to kill Shirley. They found a 55-pound murder weapon near the body. So investigators found a bunch of cement pieces in Ed Jarnowich's truck, but just because they found cement pieces in his truck doesn't mean those pieces came from that block of cement. So investigators needed to somehow link this cement that was found in Ed Jarnowich's truck when they did their investigation to the concrete block that was the murder weapon found near the body. So the forensic geologist compared the concrete block to the concrete particles that were found in Ed Jarnowich's truck. So basically what they did was they took all of these particles from Ed Jarnowich's truck and held it up next to the concrete block that was used as a murder weapon that was broken, and tried to kind of fit the little pieces onto the block. They were trying to see if those little particles were the broken pieces from that block. They described it as a jigsaw puzzle, which is exactly what it looked like, to be honest with you. But unfortunately, none of those pieces matched. Next, they sent samples of the bite wound over to a forensic odontologist. Now, a forensic odontologist's job is pretty much to identify bite marks. It's kind of like a dentist, but for a forensic scientist dentist. That makes sense. And Ed Andronowich actually wore dentures, which they also sent in to this same odontologist for analysis. Now, the question they were asking themselves were, are dentures hard enough to bite through skin? I mean, they knew that obviously dentures are, strong enough to bite through food, but skin and human tissue, that's on a whole nother level. A level that I wish he hadn't gone, because boy, this is getting sick. Next, the odontologist performed a matrix analysis. That's basically where they measured the arch and width of the dentures to see if it matched with the bite marks. But the doctor found very little similarities. So at this point, investigators were starting to question if they had the right person. I mean, first it was that his story was a little bit inconsistent and missing some pieces. Now it's that the bite mark doesn't match. I mean, it is a little weird, but if Ed didn't do it, then who did? That's what I'm wondering. So during the autopsy, the medical examiner did swab around the bite mark wounds to see if they could find any DNA or forensic evidence. So basically how it works is the forensic scientist takes a little Q-tip and they rub it into a moistened piece of filter paper, and this paper is pink, and it turns a different color when it's positive for saliva. And guess what? It turned white. It was in fact positive for saliva. So the next thing forensic scientists did was to perform a test to find out the blood type of the saliva. Now this was back in 1990 when they had just discovered ELISA. It was a new technique for them and they just started using it. It helped them to determine what blood type it was, so whether it was type A, O, B. The ELISA test showed that the perpetrator had type B blood. And guess what, you guys? This was not the same blood type as Ed Andronowich. Girl, what is going on? Obviously, since Ed was a type A blood type, he could not have possibly left that bite mark on Shirley. So at this point, investigators is like, this is not our guy. We made a huge mistake. We don't know why he's lying and going around confessing to murders, especially a murder of his wife when he didn't do it. They had to just let him go. They released him 2 months after he was arrested. Now, when Ed Andronowich was released, there was tons of news people outside trying to get his statement, but he had no comment to say to anyone. He just kept saying, no comment, no comment. They were like, are you happy to be free? He's like, no comment. They're like, what are you gonna do next? He's like, no comment. They're like, why did you lie about killing your wife? He's like, no comment. And then they were like, are you gonna have McDonald's today? And he was like, no comment. I'm just kidding. They did not ask him about McDonald's. I made that up. Now, come to find out, while investigators was interviewing Ed, They were just asking him questions, and he was kind of like, well, I might have. They were like, did you have a fight with your wife? He's like, maybe. Then it was like, did you kill your wife? Maybe. Like, dude, I think you would know if you killed your wife or not, but whatever. So he was such an alcoholic that he really didn't remember. Now it's time to go into the palate. But anyway, back to the story. Now, memory blackouts happen with alcohol because alcohol interferes with the neuron transmission that forms memory in the brain. As you can imagine, police were pretty frustrated because now they had to start their entire investigation over again. So, like any good investigator would, they went back to take another look at the evidence, that concrete block. And they found that the concrete block really resembled a bumper stop of a park in the parking lot. The forensic geologist, he came to the conclusion that the concrete block had to be about 5 years old. This is extremely hard to do on the left eye. So forensic geologist went to the crime scene to, take another look at it, reanalyze it. If that concrete piece did come from a parking lot bumper, possibly it could have been the same parking lot that Shirley's body was found in. The forensic genealogist went back to the scene of the crime around the same time that the murder was committed, and he just took a look at everything. He was just, poking around, snooping around, trying to see the scene as though it had happened that night. I have no idea what I'm doing, you guys. I've never done a look like this before. If anybody know an easier way, please let me know. So he went back there. He stood in the same exact spot as where the body was, and he was just going over all of the possible theories. So pretty much if Shirley had been strangled and was unconscious, then the next step would have been for the killer to get this block. And so where did he get the block from? Then about 500 feet away, the forensic genealogist saw this illuminated part of the parking lot. Then underneath this illuminated spot in the parking lot, he found a piece of cement. And then a couple feet away, he found another piece of cement. So there are cement blocks all around that area. Ooh, I think I did something here. I can shape it. Ooh. Now these cement pieces were very similar to the murder weapon. It's possible that the killer was drawn to that illuminated area and decided to pick up the concrete, because if the forensic geologist could see it, he probably saw it too. Now, to prove his theory, this forensic geologist had to find out if the murder weapon and the pieces he found in the parking lot was a part of the same block. Next time I need to watch a tutorial before I try shit like this, Like, who told me that I could just jump on here and be like, yeah, I can do that? So to do this, he had to perform a petrographic examination. Now, petrography means the identification of minerals. I believe that's what it is. So this forensic genealogist compared all of the material it took to make up this specific concrete and to the material that made up the murder weapon, and come to find out it was the exact same concrete. And when they put the pieces next to each other, they fit like a glove. So at this point, the forensic scientists were trying to find out if they could find a fingerprint from the murder weapon, because obviously somebody picked that brick up. But trying to find a fingerprint on concrete or cement is not as easy as it sounds. So as a last resort, the forensic geologist decided to use super glue fuming. If you guys don't know what super glue fuming is, I talked about this before in previous videos, but I'll explain it again, don't you worry. Now, how super glue fuming works is a drop of super glue is placed into a chamber along with the print, or whatever item has the print on it. The chamber is then heated for up to 6 hours by heating up the glue. Now, by heating the super glue, films condense and adhere to the biological materials such as fingerprints. Under a fluorescent light, the biological material glows and produces a clear print. The forensic geologist did the same steps with the concrete. There was only one problem. Now, super glue is made up of cyanoacrylate ester. The concrete color matched that of cyanoacrylate ester. So the forensic scientists needed to find another substance that they could use in replace of the cyanoacrylate so that the prints would show up from the concrete. This video is definitely gonna go up late, probably Monday. So if you're watching this and it's on Monday, don't be surprised. In order to get a print, he needed to find some sort of substance that would adhere to the concrete. So he tried a few different times and finally he found something. It was a biological stain known as Sudan black. And finally they got a break. They were able to see the killer's fingerprint. However, it was so badly smudged, they thought that it may be difficult to identify. I am feeling a little bit Lucky Charmish here, but I'm gonna just go with it because at this point we've already gone down the rabbit hole, so we're just gonna continue. You know what I mean? Police were starting to theorize that the fact that, you know, the perpetrator had pulled this piece of cement from the parking lot, they felt that it was an impulse crime, that it had just taken place in the moment, and that the killer most likely had taken off on foot. At this point, a year's passed, the trail is getting cold, and they are trying to grasp and find anything that they can to solve this case. Now, for a year after the crime had taken place, the local news stations and papers did continue to report on the crime, report on the murder, because they were hoping that at some point that maybe someone would come forward, maybe someone would remember something that they may have seen and they would come forward so that this case could finally be solved. And thank God they did that, because it actually led to the break in the case. An anonymous informant came forward and said that his roommate had come home really late at night on the same day that Shirley Andronowich had been killed, and that his roommate had bloodstains on his shirt and on his pants. Girl. Busted. Can we say that again? His name was Mark Jarman, and he lived right across the street from the scene of the crime. Now, this Mark Jarman guy, he was a 29-year-old unemployed construction worker. Now, his roommate also said that Mike had burned his clothes the day after the murder. So police collected samples of Mike's DNA and sent it to the forensics lab. And what do you know? The blood test revealed that Mike Jarman was a B blood type, which matched the saliva they collected from the bite mark on Shirley's body. Photographs of Jarman's teeth and dental impressions were also sent to the forensics lab, and he actually had a very particular set of dental imprints. I mean, it was identifiable teeth. He had a very specific bite that kind of grinded the upper and lower teeth down into a specific like flat surface or pattern on the teeth. I don't know if this makes sense. I'm not a dentist, but so I don't know the proper terminology. There was also a lot of gaps in his teeth and some chips on his tooth that had not been like fixed. So the forensic odontologist came to the conclusion that his bite mark was consistent with the bite marks they found on Shirley's body. They didn't have a definite, but his teeth could not be excluded from, you know, those bite marks. So it definitely was really close. Now, the other thing police found was a shopping list in the parking lot of the crime scene, but they weren't sure if the shopping list had anything to do with the murder. On that receipt, there was fingerprints, and it belonged to none other than, you guessed it guys, Mark Jarman. Obviously, this would put him at the scene of the crime around the time of the murder. Now, after an intensive interview, Mark Jarman finally confessed to police that he was in fact the killer. He told them everything that had happened that night. Now, according to Mark, he was in the same bar as Ed and Shirley the night of the murder. He saw the two of them, but he didn't speak to them. And he saw Ed, you know, get up and leave, and he left Shirley alone. He claims that he bumped into Shirley later on that night in front of the high school when she was like out walking. Now, according to Mark, He and Shirley was talking and they had consensual sex. After that, she threatened to tell her husband. I'm just kind of confused because like if the sex was consensual, why would she threaten him with like, I'm gonna tell my husband that we had sex? I mean, that kind of doesn't really make any sense because that would implement her as guilty as the bad guy as well. So maybe she was like, hey, I'm probably gonna have to tell my husband about this crap. I don't know. He killed her because of that. Like he just went crazy and was like, no, I don't want you to tell your husband, which doesn't make sense because he didn't really know her husband. So who gives a crap if she tells her husband? He's not married, right? She's the one that's married. She's gonna be in trouble. So why do you care if she tells her husband? That makes no sense, but okay. But anyway, homeboy says that he staged the scene to look like a robbery. But anyway, when police got there, they were too smart and they didn't believe that shit anyway. So that was a waste of time, sir. Investigators were not believing Mark's entire story. They didn't believe it went down like that. So they brought in a blood splatter analyst. This blood splatter analyst examined the scene of the crime and examined the blood splatter to determine what exactly occurred. The distance in which blood travels from an impact wound is about 12 feet. This would create medium velocity impact spatter. Now on the receipt that was found 10 to 12 feet from Shirley Andronowich's body, they found blood spatter on the receipt. They found that Shirley Andronowich's purse was ransacked before she was murdered and not after she was murdered, as Mark had originally stated. Remember, he said that he had staged the crime scene after he had killed her to make it look like a robbery. Well, that wasn't exactly true. Liar, liar, pants on fire. Like for real, you're going to hell, dude. Straight to hell. Do not pass go, do not collect $200, straight to hell. Not jail, hell. You'll stop in jail, actually. Your purgatory will be in jail and then you'll go to hell. Thanks to forensic science and some good police work, Mark Jarman was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for 25 years. What did you guys think about this case and my makeup look? Please let me know in the comments down below. If you like videos like these, you can check out my last episode. I'll leave it linked on the screen right here or right here. Thank you guys so much for watching my videos. Please share because it really helps me out. I'm super sorry that this video is going up late. Like, comment, subscribe, and share. Please share because it really helps me out. And I'll see you guys next week. Bye.